Hi guys, welcome to Aimee's Cooking. Today we are going to be making some yummy, delicious, so soft and tender, melt in your mouth donuts. If you guys are a donut fan, this is going to be the recipe for you. This recipe is going to give you beautiful, smooth, golden brown donuts with that special glaze on top. What's a donut without this thin layer of flaky glaze when you tear the donuts apart? And as you can see here, the dough, the bread itself, is so light, airy, and fluffy, but it just has that right amount of chewiness to it that when you bite into the donut, it doesn't feel doughy. It feels very soft and light and airy. So if you guys are interested in making this recipe, before we head to start making it, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button so you'll be notified when I post my next video. So there are a few key essential steps when making this donut. Obviously, the first thing is making the dough. Here I have some cold milk straight from the fridge. To it, I am going to add the sugar, and we will also add the unsalted butter along with it. We're going to take this entire mixture and we're going to put it in the microwave for about a minute. Majority of the butter has melted by this point, but what's left you can use a whisk and break it apart and combine everything until it's fully dissolved. To it, we're going to add the honey and along with it 2 large size room temperature egg. Now this will become the liquid for our dough. If you are using active dry yeast, you will want to go ahead and add that yeast to this mixture and let it become activated and foamy before you add it to the dry ingredients. For the dry ingredients, we are using all-purpose flour along with some salt, and we're going to whisk that a little bit before we add in the yeast. So here I'm adding in the instant yeast, and because it's instant yeast, I can add it straight to the flour without having to activate it. But as I mentioned earlier, if you are using the active form instead of the instant rapid rise, you can add it to this liquid here and just make sure that you activate it, get it to bloom and foamy before you add it to the dough. Okay, we are ready to mix this flour and knead it into a dough. I am using my KitchenAid mixer today, and on stir, we're going to let it run for about a minute or two. You may have to kick up the speed some to knock down the flour that's against the wall of the bowl, but once everything is fully hooked onto the dough hook, we're going to kick the speed up to number 4 and leave it on number 4 for at least 5 minutes. At the 5-minute mark, the dough is going to look somewhat very sticky and wet. This is pretty normal because of the increase in temperature while kneading the dough. As you can see here, it's falling off the hook very easily. It is not ready yet. At this point, just clean the sides of the bowl by scraping down the dough and then kicking the speed back up to number 4. We're going to knead it for another 2 to 3 minutes. What you want to look for is a dough that can hang onto the hook pretty securely, which means there's a lot of gluten formation that has developed. The dough should also look very smooth and glossy and stretchable. At that point, go ahead and remove it, and we're going to form it into a ball. You may want to add some oil or butter to your hands to work with it easier because it is going to be somewhat sticky. We're going to place that ball into a greased bowl, and we're going to grease the top of the dough as well. Go ahead and cover it with a towel, and we're going to rest this in the oven for about 1.5 hours with the light on. In the meantime, we're going to cut up some parchment paper so that we can use it to line the baking tray. And when we line this baking tray, you want to give some space in between. What we're going to be doing here is this is going to be where we will lay the donuts once we cut them up and shape them. At this point, we are ready to shape the donut, so go ahead and grease the counter and take the dough out from the oven. As you can see here, it has a very good rise and it's too firm to the touch and it's not flimsy. All of these are really important characteristics of a good dough. Using a rolling pin, we are going to flat out the dough into a circle, but you want a height of about 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch is just perfect for when the dough rises. It gives you that very nice tall donut. You're going to need something a circle and with a sharp edge. So either obviously a donut cutter or cookie cutters, or if you don't have either of those, you can just use a glass or a cup that has a sharp edge to one side, and you're going to need two different sizes. You're going to need a large one and you're going to need something smaller. So these cookie cutters I'm using are nice in the sense that they come in various different sizes, which allows me to kind of pick and choose if I want larger donuts or if I want smaller ones. If you want to also buy the same one, I do have a link in the description box below, along with all of the ingredients for today's recipe. Go ahead and remove the extra pieces, but we are going to roll these up again and let it rest and flatten it out and repeat the process. We're not going to waste any of the dough. Here I am using two different sizings for the middle. The one that I'm using right now is a 1 inch, and the one that you see here is a 1.5 inch. So I actually like the 1.5 inch more just because it leaves the outer ring just the right sizing, like the ones that you see or purchase from the bakery or the donut shops. So again, the larger one is the 3.25 inch and the smaller one is a 1.5 inch. Now once they've all been shaped, you want to transfer them to the parchment paper that we cut up earlier. When you put down the donuts, make sure you try to retain the shape of it so that when you allow it to rise, it will have that nice uniform circle. We'll use the middle for donut holes, and then the pieces that are left over, knead it for a few minutes and then form it back into a ball. We're going to let this rest for about 20 to 25 minutes just until the dough is easier to work with, and then flatten it out and repeat the same steps as we did earlier. I find that having a cooking thermometer really does make a huge difference when it comes to frying donuts. You want the temperature to get to 325 degrees for this recipe. Using donut holes, we can test the oil. When you place the donut holes into the oil, it should only take about 5 to 10 seconds before you see this gentle bubble around it. That tells you the oil is at the perfect temperature for the consistency of this particular dough. So I want to elaborate why it's so important to fry donuts at the correct temperature. So when you fry donuts, if the heat is too hot, it's going to cook the donuts way too fast, and what you end up with are donuts that have these patchy brown looking area on the donuts, and it will not come out very uniformly browned. If you fry the donuts and the oil is not hot enough, then the donuts will be sitting in the oil much longer. What that will do is it will spend all that time in the grease absorbing a lot of the oil. So you'll end up with donuts that are super greasy. I mean, literally, when you tear those donuts apart, you will see grease oozing out of the donuts, and that's just not the type of donuts you want. So again, having a cooking thermometer is really, really important, as well as making sure that you test out the oil, and we want to cook one at a time to make sure that you get the donuts to this nice golden, very beautiful uniform brown looking donuts. So these are done. I have finished the first batch. The donut holes looks beautiful. The donuts itself, they are very golden brown, very beautiful looking. You don't see those patches of the brown that I mentioned, and this is with the help of the thermometer that gives you just that perfect temperature. So as you can see here, what I love about this bread is that it's very light, airy, and fluffy, but also in the meantime, it has a very just right amount of chewiness to the donuts. As you can see here, when I press it together, you don't see the oil oozing out of the side of the donuts, and it's so fluffy. So while the donuts are cooling down some, we'll go ahead and start preparing the glaze. So for the glaze, it's very simple. You have melted butter with a little bit of vanilla and powdered sugar with some milk. Now how thick or how thin you want this glaze is really up to you. I, in my preference, actually prefer a thinner glaze. I will show you at the end of this video two different versions. One where I glaze with a thin layer and one I glaze with much thicker glaze. So the only difference between the thin glaze and the thick glaze is just the amount of liquid that you put into the powdered sugar. The more obviously liquid that you add to it, the thinner the glaze is going to be, and if you add a little bit less liquid, the glaze is going to be much thicker. Now this is totally up to you and up to your preference. If you want something sweeter, then just go for the thicker glaze. If you want something that's a little bit nicer, crispier glaze and not so thick, then just go with the thinner ones. So here is the thin glaze. So when you press into it, you can see that the flakes of the glaze is super thin and flaky. And let me tell you, it took many different trials and errors to be able to get the glaze looking like this. And so the tip here is that you want the donuts to still be warm, but you definitely want to make sure that there's no oil on the donuts when you start glazing them. So this is the thicker glaze version. As you can see here, when I tear this donut apart, the glaze is just much thicker. Either version is still very delicious. So if you want something sweeter, go with this one. Alright guys, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and will consider giving this recipe a try. As always, I am very appreciative of your support for the channel, and I hope you will continue to support the channel and support my recipes. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and also the notification bell so that you'll be notified when I post my next video. Thank you so much.